air is still grey, heavy with that in-between quiet before the neighbourhood wakes. A pair of bolt cutters gleams in the half-light, raised high in Karen's grip. Her breath huffs out with effort as she strains against the hardened steel lock clamped on the Jeep's chain. 2 HOA board members hover behind her, clipboards tucked under their arms like shields. Snap. The metallic crack echoes down the empty street, louder than it should be, sharp as glass breaking. The lock tumbles to the pavement and skitters into the gutter. Sparks from the cutters flash faint orange before fading, as though the act itself set off a warning flare. Karen exhales with satisfaction, lips curling in triumph. Finally, eyesore, gone. She wipes her palms on her pastel sweater, as if the lock itself had dirtied her. The men with her nod nervously, not quite convinced. One mutters, "Are we even allowed?" But Karen cuts him off with a single glare. Her words come clipped, rehearsed, like she's said them before. Community standards demand action. Behind them, the Jeep looms in the driveway. Dark green, rugged, clean, but unmistakably different from the polished sedans and SUVs lining the block. To Karen, it is an intrusion made visible. To Marcus, the man who owns it, it is pride, protection, purpose. And now it sits violated. Footsteps crunch softly on the sidewalk. A figure approaches, still in his work clothes from the night shift. Marcus. Shoulders squared from exhaustion, not aggression. His hands carry nothing but his thermos and keys. He slows as he rounds the hedge, frowning at the sight of 3 figures crouched around his driveway. His gaze drops in time to catch the lock, his lock, hitting the gutter. For a beat, no one speaks. The only sound, a distant sprinkler ticking, the faint hum of cicadas rising with the sun. Marcus's voice finally cuts through, low but steady. "What are you doing?" Karen startles, mask slipping for half a second before she straightens and plants herself between Marcus and his Jeep. She forces brightness into her tone, the false cheer of someone certain they hold the upper hand. "Just handling a violation. Your vehicle's non-compliant. Nothing personal." But Marcus doesn't answer right away. He doesn't rush. He just looks. First at the severed lock, then at the cutters in her hand, then at her. His silence fills the space, heavier than anger could. The board members shift uneasily, caught between her bravado and his quiet authority. The camera would linger here, on Marcus's stunned expression frozen in the morning light, dignity bruised but not yet broken, on the broken lock glinting in the gutter, small but loud as proof of trespass. Fade out, question hanging, whose authority really matters here? The neighbourhood looks different at 3 in the morning. What feels crisp and perfect by daylight, lawns trimmed to regulation, shutters painted in matching shades, sidewalks power washed to a sterile gleam, becomes eerie under the amber glow of street lamps. The silence feels less like peace and more like surveillance. Marcus knows this silence well. It greets him every time he drags himself home from his night shift. He walks with an unhurried steadiness, a thermos swinging loosely in his hand. His work boots scuff against the pavement, leaving faint echoes that make the neat houses feel even emptier. He's used to being the only figure moving when the rest of the neighbourhood sleeps. At the end of his walk, waiting under a flickering lamp like a sentinel, is the Jeep. Dark green, squared shoulders, a vehicle built for terrain far wilder than this subdivision. Its presence is almost defiant, rugged against the backdrop of vinyl siding and manicured hedges. To anyone else, it might just be an old Jeep with too much history on it. To Marcus, it's more. The Jeep is his tether. He bought it years ago with saved paychecks, sanding down rust spots with his own hands, learning each nut and bolt until the machine almost breathed with him. He calls it the dog. Loyal, stubborn, never ornamental. It carried him through rainstorms and blackout roads, through long commutes and quiet getaways when city noise threatened to crush him. In this neighborhood of polished SUVs, the Jeep is his mark of identity. Marcus slows before it, as he always does. He places a palm on the hood for a moment, the way someone might greet a friend. Under the flickering light, his shoulders ease, the weariness of the night shift softening. The Jeep doesn't judge him. The Jeep doesn't whisper behind closed blinds. But the neighborhood does. F. From certain windows, curtains twitch when Marcus arrives home. He hears the muffled click of locks, the pause of conversations. No one says anything outright. No insults shouted, no graffiti tagged. Just silence sharpened into distance. The kind of polite avoidance that leaves a man out of block parties and ignored at mailbox clusters. Karen is the engine of that distance. HOA president, 3 years running. Retired early, fueled by boredom and a bottomless appetite for control. She patrols sidewalks in pastel sweaters, clipboard in hand, hunting for infractions. Recycling bins placed 6 inches off, grass longer than regulation, a garden gnome deemed too gaudy. Her power lies not in law, but in fear of fines and shaming emails, and she relishes it. When Marcus first moved in, Karen welcomed him with a smile too wide, eyes flicking over his Jeep before they flicked back to him. She handed him the HOA manual like it was a Bible, every page highlighted, sticky-noted, ready for enforcement. Since then, every notice has his name on it. Grass too patchy, mailbox not aligned with curb standards, Jeep improperly stored. He fixed what he could, ignored what he couldn't. But the Jeep, that was non-negotiable. It was his. Still, Karen persisted. She'd pause in front of his driveway during her morning walks, eyes narrowing at the sight of the Jeep under its lock and chain. To Marcus, the chain was a practical measure, protection against theft, a habit from living in rougher neighborhoods before. To Karen, it was a challenge to her curated order, a reminder that not everything bent under HOA rules. Inside his home, Marcus's world was simple. Walls lined with family photos, his mother smiling in Sunday hats, his younger cousins clinging to him at reunions, a bookshelf stacked with worn paperbacks, mostly mysteries and history. He didn't entertain much. Most nights, it was just him and the Jeep outside, the hum of his coffee maker, the occasional call with his sister across state lines. He wasn't loud. He wasn't disruptive. He worked, paid his dues, minded his space. A man steady as bedrock. But in a neighborhood built on appearances, his steadiness made him invisible until Karen needed someone to target. It wasn't that Marcus feared her. It was that he recognized the pettiness for what it was, and he refused to feed it. Quiet competence, he believed, was its own defense. Let them whisper. Let them fine. The Jeep would stay. His dignity would hold. Yet beneath his calm, a weariness pressed in. Every glance at his mailbox held the possibility of another bright HOA envelope. Every slow walk home felt watched, and every flicker of the streetlight above the Jeep reminded him how fragile peace could be when someone with power decided you didn't belong. One night, as he touched the Jeep's hood beneath that stuttering light, Marcus whispered under his breath, not to anyone, just to himself. They don't know what this means. The Jeep, silent and loyal, gleamed back at him, as though it did. The letter came folded crisp in an envelope stamped with the HOA's logo, slipped into Marcus's mailbox like a summons. He opened it at the kitchen counter, coffee mug steaming, shoulders still heavy from his overnight shift. The words were formal but blunt. You are hereby notified that the vehicle stored in your driveway is in violation of Section 4.2, Article B of the Homeowners Association Agreement. Unsightly or non-compliant storage is prohibited. Please remove said vehicle within 10 days to avoid escalating fines. Marcus read it twice, then a third time. The Jeep, unsightly storage. He let out a long breath, folded the letter neatly, and set it aside. He He had dealt with these notices before. Grass height, mailbox colour, minor things he'd corrected without fuss. But the Jeep? That was different. That wasn't negotiable. The following evening, Karen was already waiting. She stood at the foot of his driveway, pastel sweater pressed crisp, clipboard balanced in one arm, phone camera in the other. She was snapping pictures of the Jeep from every angle like a crime scene investigator. Marcus walked up slowly, keys jingling in his pocket. "Evening," he said evenly. Karen didn't lower her phone. Click. Another photo. "This vehicle," she announced, as if reading from a script, "violates multiple HOA standards. It is both improperly stored and presents a visual nuisance. You've been given notice." Marcus's brow furrowed. "It's my driveway. My lock. My vehicle. Nothing unsightly about it." She finally lowered the phone, tilting her chin like a schoolteacher about to scold. "Tone, Marcus. There's no need to be defensive. Rules are rules." "I'm explaining," he replied, steady, not rising. "That Jeep is secure, well-maintained. It's not trash. It's not broken. It's not hurting anyone." Karen gave a small laugh, sharp as glass. "You don't get to decide what's hurting the neighborhood's character. That's why the HOA exists." She tapped her clipboard with a manicured finger, smiling as if the law itself bent toward her. "And let's be honest, a chain across the driveway? It makes the whole street look like a used car lot." Marcus just looked at her. His silence stretched long enough that one of the board members, a thin man shifting awkwardly at her side, cleared his throat and muttered, "Maybe we should—" Karen cut him off. "He's had enough warnings." She turned back to Marcus, eyes glittering with satisfaction. "You'll receive escalating fines if it's not gone within 10 days. And if you think ignoring us will work, it won't. The board has authority to act." Marcus's voice was low, even, but laced with steel. "It's my Jeep. It's not going anywhere." For a moment their eyes locked. Her smile didn't waver, but something in her posture stiffened, like she wasn't used to being answered without apology. She scribbled on her clipboard, snapped one last photo, and walked off briskly. As her heels clicked away down the sidewalk, Marcus stood by his Jeep, the lock gleeks, painted in the fading light. He ran a hand along the hood, grounding himself. He knew what the Jeep meant to him. What Karen didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that the vehicle wasn't just his pride. It served a larger purpose, one he couldn't explain to her without breaking trust. But Karen had already made up her mind. Later that night, in the glow of her kitchen laptop, she drafted an email to the HOA board, her fingers tapped with relish. "If voluntary compliance isn't achieved, we will proceed with physical removal. I will make the necessary arrangements. This kind of blight cannot be allowed to stand." She hit send with a little smile, sipping her wine. She didn't see it as pettiness. To her it was order, authority, a victory waiting to be claimed. What she didn't know was that the battle had already begun. She just hadn't realized she was on the wrong side of it. The notice lay on Marcus's kitchen table for 2 days before he decided what to do. He wasn't impulsive, not the kind of man to let anger drive his steps. But he believed in fairness, in systems working the way they claimed they did. If the HOA had rules, then there had to be a process. And if there was a process, he would use it. So he filed a complaint, typed it neatly, printed it clean, signed his name in a deliberate hand. It wasn't angry, just factual. "My vehicle is in good condition, secure and legally registered. It poses no safety hazard. I request that this matter be reconsidered." The following Tuesday, he showed up at the HOA meeting. The community center smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a thin electrical hum filling the silence. Folding chairs were arranged in rigid rows, half filled with residents clutching printed agendas. At the front sat the board. Karen in the center, flanked by 4 others, all with papers neatly stacked and pens poised. Marcus took a seat near the back. His presence drew glances, some curious, some wary, a few sympathetic. He sat quietly, hands folded in his lap, waiting for his chance to speak. The meeting rolled through minutes, budgets, landscaping updates. Then Karen cleared her throat and tapped the microphone. Next item, vehicle violations. Specifically, the matter of Mr. Marcus Hill's Jeep. The room shifted. Chairs squeaked as neighbors turned to look. Marcus rose calmly, paper in hand, and walked to the small podium at the front. His voice carried steady but measured. I filed a written complaint. I'd like to explain. My Jeep is secure, registered, and not abandoned. It's chained for theft prevention. It's clean, operational, and it's in my driveway, not on CSA.
The street. I don't believe it violates the standards of the community.
Karen didn't look at him. She shuffled her papers as if bored, then raised a hand to stop him mid-sentence. Bang! The gavel cracked down. Mr. Hill, the board has already reviewed the matter, she said. Section 4.2b clearly prohibits non-standard storage. A chain and lock qualify as non-standard. Marcus nodded slightly. I understand the section, but the spirit of that rule was to keep broken-down vehicles or junk from cluttering the neighborhood. This Jeep is not junk. It's bang! Another slam of the gavel. The sound jolted in the small room, louder than it should have been. You're not here to lecture us on spirit, Karen snapped, voice sweetened for the room but edged with contempt. Rules are rules. A murmur rippled through the residence. One older man in the second row, Mr. Perkins, retired Navy, raised his hand timidly. Excuse me, but I've seen Marcus's Jeep. It's not unsightly. It's in better condition than half the cars parked outside my grandkids' school. Karen turned sharply, smile tightening.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins, but this isn't about opinion. It's about compliance.
Another murmur followed. A woman 2 seats over whispered to her friend, but was silenced by Karen's glare. Marcus tried again, calm as ever. I'm not asking for exceptions. I'm asking for fairness. The vehicle is secure, clean, and no different in principle from the boats some neighbors park in their driveways. That broke a chuckle out of the crowd. Someone muttered, Yeah, what about Bill's fishing boat? Karen's eyes flashed. Bang. Gavel again. This meeting will maintain order. She leaned forward, voice dropping lower, meant for Marcus but loud enough for the room. If every resident decided to interpret the rules their own way, we'd have chaos. We are not here for debate. Marcus exhaled slowly, steadying himself. He placed his written complaint on the podium, sliding it toward her. Then I'll let this speak for me. Karen didn't reach for it. One of the board members did, hesitantly. Karen simply adjusted her sweater and gave a tight smile. Duly noted. The board will take action as it deems appropriate. The dismissal was final. Marcus walked back to his chair, posture straight, face unreadable. But inside, a coil of frustration wound tighter. He had spoken calmly, respectfully, used the process, and been ignored. The meeting pressed on. Landscaping, budgets, trivial chatter. But tension lingered in the air like static. The neighbors had seen it. The way Karen silenced him. The way reason was swatted aside like a fly. Some exchanged glances. Others looked away, unwilling to challenge her. By the time adjournment came, Marcus was the first to stand. He nodded to Mr. Perkins on his way out. The old man gave him a small salute, quiet solidarity. Outside, the night air felt cooler, freer. He walked back to his Jeep under the yellow streetlights. It chained across its hood, catching the glow like armor. He rested his hand on the hood for a moment. In the silence of the parking lot, his calm voice returned to him in memory, cut short, drowned out, dismissed. But beneath the frustration was something else. Resolve. If fairness wouldn't be given, he would have to hold it himself. And as the sprinklers kicked on, hissing against the manicured grass. Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The first picture appeared on the neighborhood Facebook group on a Tuesday morning. Marcus hadn't even logged in to see it. A co-worker who lived 2 streets over showed him at the end of their shift. The photo was angled low, catching the Jeep's chain head-on, like it was shackled in some back-alley impound. Karen's caption, in her familiar clipped tone, read, "Is this what we want our community to look like? A chained-up eyesore sitting in plain sight. Blight spreads. Let's hold ourselves to higher standards." By noon, the post had comments stacked beneath it. Some echoed Karen. Agreed. Not a junkyard. Others tried neutrality. It's his property, though? But the loudest voices were the mocking ones. Memes, jokes about prison Jeep, little barbs that rolled downhill. When Marcus drove home that afternoon, he felt the difference. The kids who usually played basketball on the corner went quiet when his Jeep turned onto the street. One of them giggled, whispering "Blight," before their friend elbowed him. Curtains shifted. A neighbor who normally waved just kept watering his lawn, hose aimed at nothing. The silence weighed more than insults would have. The next letter came 2 days later. Another official envelope, this time with bolder language. Final notice before escalation. Vehicle must be removed immediately. Fines have been increased due to non-compliance. The amount at the bottom made Marcus pause. Triple what it had been before. Enough to sting hard if he paid it. Enough to show this wasn't about rules anymore. It was about punishment. He folded the letter slowly, set it on the counter beside the others. His kitchen table was becoming a filing cabinet of harassment. That weekend, Marcus tried to keep routine. He washed the Jeep under the noon sun, sponge dragging across the hood in slow circles. The green paint caught the light, looking proud, untarnished. He worked quietly, focused, but he could feel eyes. From windows. From driveways. Karen herself strolling by, phone in hand, snapping another picture without even pretending to ask. He met her gaze once, soap dripping from the sponge. He didn't speak. Neither did she. But the triumph in her smirk told him enough. The following Monday, it happened. A notice of tow, printed on neon paper, taped crookedly across his windshield like graffiti. Marcus saw it when he stepped out after work, the harsh afternoon sun turning the paper into a glaring accusation. He peeled it away slowly, fingers steady but jaw tight. The glue left a faint streak on the glass. Neighbors paused at their mailboxes, pretending to check envelopes while sneaking glances. One whispered to another, shaking their head like Marcus was already guilty of something larger. He crumpled the flyer in his fist. For a moment, the anger surged hot, an urge to shout, to march to Karen's door, to tear through the silence that cloaked the neighborhood. His chest rose, breath sharp. But then he stopped, closed his eyes, held the paper tighter until it crinkled into a small ball. When he opened his eyes again, the fire was gone, replaced by the steady weight of dignity. He wouldn't give them the outburst they expected. Instead, he tucked the flyer into his pocket and turned back to his Jeep. Inside, though, the cracks deepened. Each whisper he overheard, each glance avoided, pressed against him. He'd grown up knowing the power of assumption, the way people could decide who you were before you opened your mouth. But this was different. This was institutional. A committee, a president, a system disguised as order, pressing its thumb on him. Later that evening, Marcus sat in his living room, blinds half drawn. He heard the distant laugh of children outside, the rumble of a car pulling into a driveway, the faint ping of another Facebook notification on his phone. He didn't open it. He didn't need to see more pictures of his Jeep dissected like a problem. What cut deepest wasn't the fines or the threats. It was the way neighbors who knew his name now avoided his eyes, the way his presence had become a spectacle, the way dignity, once quiet and intact, was being chipped away not with violence, but with mockery. Still, he didn't lash out. He didn't post angry replies or storm meetings. He carried himself the way he always had, steady, calm, deliberate. But inside, the pressure built like heat under a sealed hood. The Jeep sat locked and unmoved in the driveway, defiant against the glare of the sun and the whispers of the block. Its chain glinted in the light like a dare. And Marcus, pulling the crumpled notice from his pocket one last time, stared at it before dropping it into the trash. His eyes glistened, not from defeat, but from the cost of restraint. Because restraint always costs. It happened on a Thursday morning, the kind of morning when the sky still held a bluish hush before the sun burned everything white. Marcus was inside, rinsing out his coffee mug when he heard the sound. Not the usual chatter of sprinklers or the soft hum of cars warming up. This was metallic, harsh, a grinding clank that tightened his chest before he even looked. He stepped onto his porch and froze. A tow truck idled in his driveway, hazard lights blinking in slow orange pulses. The chain across his Jeep hung limp, cut clean. And there was Karen, bolt cutters in hand again, her pastel sweater gleaming under the new sun, her mouth set in a satisfied grin. 2 board members hovered behind her, nervous, but unwilling to stop her. The Jeep's front tires were already strapped, the tow operator tightening the winch. "Stop," Marcus said, voice sharp enough to slice the morning air. Karen turned, startled but recovering quickly. "Mr. Hill," she chirped, as if this were a cordial errand, "we gave you more than enough time. You chose not to comply. The board is within its rights." Marcus walked down the steps, slow but purposeful. His eyes never left hers. "That's my property. You don't touch it." "Correction," Karen said, chin lifting. "This is our neighborhood, and when one person refuses to follow the rules, it becomes everyone's problem. Order must be maintained." The tow operator looked uneasy. "Ma'am, you sure about this? Property disputes can get messy." Karen waved him off. "It's already authorized." She turned back to Marcus, her smile widening like a blade. "You can take it up with the board. After the Jeep is gone." Marcus's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, putting himself between the tow and the Jeep. His voice dropped lower, steadier. "You don't know what you're doing." Karen laughed. "Oh, I know exactly. You think you're above the rules because you glare and stay silent. But rules are rules, and I enforce them." She gestured to the tow operator. "Continue." That's when the Jeep door opened. It wasn't Marcus who moved it. From the driver's side, a man climbed out, plain clothes, ball cap pulled low, movements deliberate. He reached into his jacket, flipped something open. A badge glinted in the sun, catching every eye on the street. "Step away from the vehicle," the officer said evenly. His gaze swept the scene, settling on Karen with the weight of authority she had never faced before. The board members stumbled back. The tow operator froze mid-turn of his wrench. Karen blinked, her certainty faltering. "Excuse me, who are you?" The officer didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He held the badge steady. "Federal Task Force. This vehicle is government property. Interfering with it is a criminal offense." Silence cracked over the street like thunder. Karen's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Government? This is ridiculous. It's his Jeep. It's—" She turned to Marcus, desperate for footing. "Tell him, this is your car." Marcus said nothing. He didn't have to. The Jeep's secret was no longer his to keep. The officer stepped closer, eyes hard now. "Who authorized this tow?" Karen swallowed, color draining from her face. She gestured vaguely toward her clipboard, toward the HOA seal stamped on her papers. "The board, our community, rules are rules." The officer cut her off, voice flat. "Your rules don't supersede federal law. You've just tampered with a vehicle actively used in ongoing investigations." A gasp rippled from the handful of neighbours who had gathered at the edge of their driveways, drawn by the hazard lights and commotion. Phones came out, screens lit up. Karen suddenly found herself the centre of a spectacle she hadn't choreographed. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice cracking. "If someone had told us—" Marcus finally spoke, his tone calm but edged with steel. "I tried explaining. You didn't want to hear." The officer nodded toward the broken chain at Karen's feet, the bolt cutters still in her trembling hands. "That's evidence now." Karen's grip loosened. The cutters clattered onto the pavement. The tow operator backed away, hands raised slightly as if to say, "I'm out of this." The board members exchanged panicked looks, their clipboards suddenly looking flimsy as cardboard shields. The officer addressed Karen again, voice clipped. "Tampering with federal property can carry serious penalties. I'll need a full statement from you, and from anyone who authorized this action." Karen shook her head violently. No, it's a misunderstanding. We were just maintaining order." But the neighbours had their phones up now, recording every word, every stammer. For once, Karen's authority didn't silence them. It spotlighted her. Marcus stood still, hands at his sides, eyes on her. He didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. His calm was heavier than any accusation. The officer turned to Marcus briefly. "Sir, you'll want to keep this secure until we process the tampering. We'll be in touch." Marcus gave a single nod. When the officer looked back at Karen, his expression hardened. "You need to understand something. Authority comes with boundaries. You crossed them today." Karen's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her certainty had drained, leaving only the stark image of a woman caught holding cutters beside government property, her neighbours watching, her power evaporating. The badge gleamed once more as the officer slid it back into his jacket. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The symbol of real authority had spoken louder than all of Karen's gavel bangs and Facebook posts combined. For the first time, Karen looked small. The crowd didn't cheer, didn't jeer. They just watched. And in that silence, Marcus's dignity, bruised, mocked, pushed, stood taller than ever. The flashing lights came fast. First one squad car, then another. By the time the second rolled to a stop, the street was alive with sirens, radios crackling, officers stepping out with firm movements. Karen stumbled back as uniforms approached, hands fluttering like she could wave the situation away. "This isn't necessary," she kept saying. "We're just a neighbourhood association. A private matter." But no one listened. Officers taped off the driveway with yellow ribbon. Neighbours pushed closer, their whispers rising like a tide. Phones kept rolling, little red dots capturing Karen's fall from untouchable to cornered. Marcus stood beside the jeep, silent, arms folded loosely. He didn't have to move. The scene moved around him. One officer approached with a clipboard. "Mr. Hill, correct?" Marcus nodded. The officer's voice carried weight, but it was courteous. "Given the circumstances, you have options. Tampering with federal property is serious. You can pursue full charges. That would mean arrest warrants, potentially for the individuals who cut the lock, authorized the tow, and interfered with government use of this vehicle." Karen's face drained of colour. Her hands twisted around each other like wrung cloth. Behind her, the two board members whispered frantic excuse, Says pointing at papers, shaking their heads. The officer continued steady. "Or you can choose not to press charges. We'd still file an incident report. But whether this escalates into prosecution, that decision rests with you." The words hung in the air like heavy stones. Every eye turned toward Marcus. Even the neighbours, once content to be passive observers, leaned in now. Phones tilted. Silence thickened, broken only by the faint buzz of the tow truck engine still idling. Karen found her voice at last, thin, trembling. "You don't want to do this, Marcus. We're neighbours. Mistakes were made, but
ruining people's lives? That's not you."
The plea twisted in the air. It wasn't an apology, more a desperate bid to reframe herself as the victim. Marcus's jaw tightened. His gaze locked on her, steady but unreadable. He could do it. With a single word, yes. Karen's carefully constructed power would crumble in a courtroom, her name dragged through records, her reputation shredded. She would know, in the most public way possible, what it meant to be powerless. The thought flickered across his mind like a live wire. After all the mocking, the fines, the Facebook humiliation, the lock cut right in front of him, didn't she deserve it? But as quickly as the thought came, so did its shadow. He pictured the fallout. News headlines, whispers in the neighborhood, Karen wearing the label of criminal. He pictured her family. If she had kids, they'd bear that shame too. He thought of his own life, his job, his quiet determination to live with dignity despite being overlooked. He had always wanted more than survival, more than a constant tug of war over respect. He wanted peace. Retribution would taste sweet for a moment, but dignity, that lasted longer. The officer waited, pen poised. "Mr. Hill." Marcus took a slow breath. His voice, when it came, was quiet, but unshakable. "Document everything. I want the report filed, but I'm not pressing charges." A murmur rippled through the neighbors. Some sounded surprised, others almost disappointed, as if they had wanted to see Karen led away in cuffs, a public reckoning. Karen exhaled in relief, sagging against the tow truck. Her knees looked weak, but her eyes avoided Marcus's. The officer studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Understood. We'll process this as an incident and secure the vehicle. If you change your mind, the record will be there." Marcus inclined his head once. "Thank you." The officers moved on, gathering statements, snapping photos of the cut lock and discarded bolt cutters. Karen shrank into the background, her earlier bravado gone, her power stripped away without a single shout. Marcus stayed rooted by the jeep, the streetlight now fully brightening in the morning sun. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. His silence was louder than her frantic defenses. The neighbors watched him not as the man with the blight, not as the outsider Karen had painted him to be, but as something else entirely. Steady, unshaken, quietly commanding. The contrast was complete. Karen, who had wielded rules like weapons, now cowered in the same space she once dominated. Marcus, who had been mocked for calmness, now revealed that calm for what it was, strength. As the last officer approached him with final paperwork, Marcus glanced once more at Karen. She couldn't meet his eyes. And in that gap, in her inability to face the man she had tried to diminish, Marcus found his victory. Not in revenge, not in punishment, but in restraint. He had been given the chance to strike back. Instead, he stood taller by choosing not to, and everyone saw it. The HOA called an emergency meeting. Word spread fast. Emails, flyers slipped into mailboxes, whispers at driveways. By the time evening came, the community center was packed tighter than it had been in years. Folding chairs filled, people lined the walls, some standing near the back doors just to witness what everyone already called the Jeep incident. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of burnt coffee drifted from a silver urn on the side table. Phones were everywhere, tilted discreetly in laps, ready to catch anything worth posting. At the front, the board table looked like a trial bench. Karen sat in the center, a stack of papers in front of her, posture stiff, lips pressed thin. To her left, two board members shuffled nervously. To her right, the HOA treasurer avoided eye contact with anyone. The room buzzed until the door opened again. Two uniformed officers stepped in, clipboards under their arms. Conversation dropped to a hush. Karen cleared her throat, trying to reclaim authority. "Thank you, everyone, for coming on such short notice. We're here to discuss an unfortunate misunderstanding that's gotten, well, unnecessarily complicated." Her voice trembled only slightly, but the eyes of the room weren't warm this time. The taller officer spoke, calm and precise. "We're here to present the facts. A private vehicle belonging to a federal task force was tampered with. The securing lock was cut. A tow attempt was initiated. That is interference with government property." Gasps rippled through the room. Some neighbors glanced at Marcus, sitting quietly in the third row, hands folded in his lap. His expression was steady, not smug. Karen sat forward. "With respect, officer, our intention was never criminal. The HOA has the responsibility to maintain community standards. The Jeep in question was unsightly, a disruption. We were only acting to protect the neighborhood." Booing erupted, low at first, then swelling as people shouted over one another. "Protect the neighborhood from a parked car? You broke the law, Karen. Unsightly. That Jeep's cleaner than your driveway." Karen slammed her gavel, her voice rising, brittle with panic. "Order. This is exactly why we have rules. Without them, chaos takes over." But the crowd didn't settle. Her authority cracked in real time. One officer raised a hand. "We're not here to debate aesthetics. We're here to clarify that tampering with federal equipment is a serious violation. We're fortunate Mr. Hill chose not to press charges. Had he decided otherwise, this board would likely be facing criminal investigation." All eyes shifted to Marcus again. He sat still, his presence louder than any defense Karen could mount. Karen tried again, desperate. "Look, we all want what's best for this community, and let's be honest, appearance matters. If we allow—" She hesitated. Ted, searching for words that wouldn't sound like what they were. Her gaze darted toward Marcus. "If we allow certain choices to go unchecked, property values suffer. I acted for everyone's good." A collective groan swept the room. The veneer cracked fully now. People weren't buying the spin. Finally, from the back, a voice cut through the noise. "Enough! Let him speak." Heads turned. The call spread. "Let Marcus talk." Karen paled. "This isn't... He isn't..." But the pressure was too strong. Even the board members shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to shield her. Marcus rose slowly, his chair scraping lightly against the linoleum. He didn't stride to the front or grab a microphone. He just stood where he was, tall and steady. His voice, when it came, was calm, like always. But now the calm carried weight. "I didn't move into this neighborhood to make trouble. I work long hours like many of you. I keep to myself. I take care of my home. And that Jeep? It isn't clutter. It isn't trash. It's part of my work, part of my life." The room fell into a silence so thick the hum of the lights seemed loud. Marcus looked around slowly, meeting eyes, not rushing. "All along, I tried to explain, but every time I was dismissed. Rules were waved in my face. Fines piled up, my character questioned, not because of the Jeep, but because some people decided I didn't fit the picture they wanted on this street." Karen shifted, her jaw tightening. Marcus let the pause linger, then finished, his tone even, unshaken. "I don't need revenge. I don't need anyone humiliated. I just want to live with the same respect every neighbor deserves, that's it." The words landed heavy, because they were undeniable. No anger, no theatrics, just truth, plain and irrefutable. Applause began softly, a few claps near the back. Then it spread, hands striking together, louder, swelling, filling the room until it was a wave crashing over Karen's desperate silence. The board chair, flustered, called for a vote. "All in favor of removing Karen as president?" Hands shot up, dozens. Even the board members beside her raised theirs, unable to withstand the tide. Karen sat frozen, gavel limp in her hand. No one looked at her. No one defended her. The vote carried, overwhelming. Her reign ended not with control, but with rejection. Public, undeniable. The applause rose again, this time not tentative but roaring. Marcus didn't raise his hands. He didn't smile. He simply nodded once, collected his jacket, and slipped quietly toward the door. Neighbors parted to let him pass, their clapping still echoing through the room. Some reached out, touching his shoulder, murmuring thanks, respect. But Marcus didn't linger. He wasn't there for their approval. He didn't need the vindication of Karen's collapse. As he stepped into the cool night air, the sound of applause followed him, fading as the doors swung shut. The street outside was quiet, the stars sharp above the dark rooftops. His jeep sat where it always had, steady, waiting. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt no weight pressing on his chest, no eyes glaring, no whispers at his back. Not gloating, not triumphant, just free, and that was enough. The days after the HOA emergency meeting felt lighter, though the air still carried traces of tension like dust motes in sunlight. Marcus walked his usual route home from work and noticed something different. Neighbors who had once averted their eyes now nodded politely, some offering small smiles. A few even stopped him briefly, voices quiet but sincere. "Sorry about the past weeks," one woman murmured. "We shouldn't have let it go so far." Marcus nodded in acknowledgement, a small, unassuming gesture. No gloating, no lecture, just the quiet steadiness that had carried him through the storm. The jeep sat in the driveway, chained only for its own security, unbothered by HOA warnings or Facebook posts. Its paint caught the afternoon sun, clean and gleaming. It had become more than a vehicle. It was a visible symbol of dignity restored. Karen was gone from leadership. The neighborhood whispered about her absence, some relieved, others curious. But no one defended her actions anymore. The power she wielded like a scepter had evaporated. The gavel, once a symbol of authority, now sat untouched in the corner of the community center, useless and silent. Marcus spent his evenings restoring a sense of normalcy. He washed the jeep under the sunset glow, soapsuds running down the hood, reflecting the soft oranges and pinks of the sky. For the first time in weeks, he did it without glancing over his shoulder, without the tension that had gripped him every time he stepped outside. As he scrubbed, a few neighborhood kids wandered over. At first tentative, curious about the vehicle they had once whispered about, calling it Blight. Marcus didn't say anything, just handed them sponges. Soon, laughter replaced whispers. "Careful on the hood!" one shouted, giggling as the foam slipped through his fingers. "Look at this tire!" another added, scrubbing in a half-hearted circle before it slid down. Marcus allowed himself a quiet smile, kneeling to rinse off the soap and hand the sponge back. The jeep gleamed not just from the cleaning, but from the subtle camaraderie forming around it. A once contested symbol now bridged a gap, connecting him to neighbors who had once avoided him. Even the streetlights, flickering as dusk approached, seemed kinder. Shadows softened against the perfectly trimmed lawns. Silence was no longer oppressive but gentle, letting the normal rhythm of the neighborhood resume. Inside his home, Marcus placed the letters, fines and flyers in a small archive box. Not for revenge, not for grudge, but to remember how resilience and restraint had carried him through. He didn't dwell on the humiliation or anger he had once felt. The lessons had been absorbed quietly, carried in his posture, in the way he held himself when walking past the now quiet community center. The jeep, sitting proud in the driveway, was no longer just a vehicle. It represented a triumph of quiet integrity over petty authority, of respect earned without needing to humiliate others. It stood as a testament to persistence, dignity, and the power of measured choices. Marcus rinsed the last of the soap from the hood, letting the water run off into the driveway. Kids scampered off, waving as they headed home, their laughter fading into the evening air. He watched them go, the jeep gleaming behind him, steady and unshakable. For Marcus, life didn't return to what it had been. It became something better. The neighborhood still existed in its structured, manicured way, but now respect flowed silently through it, no longer enforced by fear or petty power. And in that quiet, Marcus finally felt free. The street was quiet before dawn, a muted world still wrapped in shadow and silver light. Marcus slid into the driver's seat of his Jeep, the engine purring softly, a companionable hum against the morning chill. He rolled down the window, letting the cool air wash over him, carrying away the remnants of tension and humiliation that had weighed so heavily just days before. The neighborhood still slept, unaware that the streets they walked were now shaded not by petty rule or gavel slams, but by quiet dignity, by a man who had refused to let assumptions define him. Marcus's reflection appeared in the side mirror. Calm, steady, almost imperceptibly proud. He didn't need applause. He didn't need recognition. His integrity had been witnessed and respected in ways far more lasting than fleeting triumphs of ego. The narrator's voice, warm and cinematic, steps in, not to lecture, but to distill the moment. Assumptions are heavy, sometimes heavier than truth can bear. We build stories about people based on what we see, what we think we know, or what we assume they are. And sometimes, those assumptions collide with reality in ways that can break trust, crush dignity, or create conflict where none should exist. The camera drifts slowly over the Jeep, gleaming in the soft light of morning, chained not for control but for protection. Marcus grips the wheel lightly, eyes forward. He is a man defined not by the petty judgments of others, but by the steadfast choice to maintain dignity, to act with quiet authority over his own actions, rather than letting bias dictate the course of his life. Dignity, the narrator continues, outlasts prejudice. It doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need vengeance. It simply persists, shaping how we move through the world, how others respond, and how justice, even in its quietest form, finds its way. As Marcus eases the Jeep down the street, the sunlight brushes the tops of trees, the neighborhood houses still bathed in gentle gold. The world is ordinary, yet transformed, carrying lessons invisible to the casual observer, but indelible to those who notice, who choose restraint over retribution, humanity over bias. The narrator leans in one last time, bridging story and viewer. If this story moved you, share it, because someone out there might be one assumption away from their own reckoning. What's the most unfair assumption you've had to overcome? Drop it in the comments. Let's start noticing the weight of assumptions and celebrating the quiet victories of dignity. The camera pulls back, leaving Marcus small against the awakening street, window down, hair caught in the morning breeze. The Jeep glides past the now still community center, past lawns that once bore judgment, past homes that once whispered, now silent witnesses. The screen fades slowly, leaving the audience with the last, resonant image. A man driving into dawn, free, not because he conquered others, but because he held fast to what was right, human, and enduring. Contrast, bias versus humanity. The weight of assumptions dissolves in the calm persistence of dignity. And with that, the story closes, not with noise or fanfare, but with quiet, unshakable truth.